with Frater O are certainly my favorites.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've read enough history, and history is something that we can reach out, we can touch, and we can read it. But when you dive into the esoteric and we talk about things like occult anatomy of man and the symbolism of a temple and a man's body and the, micro and macrocosm and everything in between, we're just so much more free and fluid to explore and experience thoughts together. And it's been really a special experience to be able to share that with him. And so, every other week he's on the show with us, and he takes time out of his schedule to do it, and it's just been a great experience. And I think that's kind of the direction the show has been trying to move toward, is to bring, go from a historical with a teeny bit of esotericism, and now we're almost at this 50-50 level, which I love, and I think our listeners really love it too, because we've got guys who are like, oh, they're going to have crazy talk with Frater O and RJ on again. You skip that episode. Or, they're like, oh, more history. John Ruark probably skips all my other episodes. He just listens to one with Frater O. So it's just been great.
Certainly has. So, Frater O, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the esoteric Masonic subjects that are close to your heart.
Well, I just wanted to comment on RJ. It definitely took some time to convince me to come on the show, because there's I try to live my life by a simple quote that those who speak don't know, and those who don't speak know. And kind of felt like for a while there that if I kind of started talking about esotericism, I'd just be kind of going against a lot of things. But he eventually convinced me, and I'm just really happy and very fortunate to be a part of the show and be able to spread so much wisdom across so many brothers, across so many lands and bodies. It's been such an amazing journey, and thank you very much for having me on the show, and thank you for having me on this show, Greg. But esotericism is a very, very big topic, and if you're not well grounded, you can lose yourself in it. And so right now, majority of my research, I know RJ as well, has been more on the occult anatomy, so the hidden body of man. And there's been these diagrams that have surfaced online that break out the whole human body as a temple. But in these temples, it's pretty much every allegory of religion is represented in it, from the Kabbalah to Hinduism to Buddhism to solar and planetary and lunar alignments to tarot cards to the story of Genesis. There's a whole lot going on, as well as we've kind of dug a little bit deeper in our research and put in Egyptian deities into these maps and Greek deities, and it seems like the same allegory keeps getting represented over and over. So, when you start diving down these esoteric, rabbit holes, it's really easy to have your ego grab hold and to, see exactly what you're looking for and trying to separate yourself from that, and really the whole journey of knowing thyself. Because there's a whole lot more going on inside of you than what's taught in any grade school or any educational system, have it be from K all the way through college.
Maybe this would be a good opportunity to bring up Robert's essay that you recently published about the situation in Tennessee. Maybe you could probably better explain what's going on, I think, if you don't mind.
Well, there's some shenanigans going on. Essentially, in a nutshell, Chris Hodap owed so much to this entire getting it out to people, really. What had happened was a few years back, and it started with I was just kind of researching things for the show, and I had come across a situation where a brother had been outed by his Grand Lodge or the Grand Master for being an Odinist. It didn't fall within the realm of what they would consider in their ancient charges, per se. So every Grand Lodge has a set of ancient charges that they follow. Some are the same, some are a little different. And, of course, the issue with this is human interpretation. And these men were expelled. Grand Lodge of California extended a hand. They said, hey, you can practice Masonry in California all you want. We don't care if you're an Odinist. I don't care if you're an Odinist. It's just one of those things. I think Freemasonry is largely supposed to be this universal fraternity. I mean, the Archduke of Sussex is the one who pulled all of the religious elements out of the ritual in England. And he did that to make it a universal fraternity. Fast forward a little while, Grand Lodge of Georgia expelled some gentlemen who were homosexual for sexual preference, and it got a lot of backlash. You know, it's interesting to me to note that only in this short period of time and this existence does something like homosexuality or being a lesbian or whatever is actually a thing. This is common practice throughout history, and men and women had companions of the same sex frequently, and nobody cared. It was not a thing to be, it was no prejudice against it. I mean, of course, there were some places, don't get me wrong, but largely it was just the way it was. It was largely accepted. And in this modern era that we live in, there is the stigma. Of course, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I wrote an essay. It was called Forcing Accountability. And the backdrop for it was these rulings that happened in Georgia that expelled homosexual Masons. And then eventually in Tennessee, where the story that I have read was something along the lines of a gentleman who was very active in his lodge in Tennessee. In fact, they were really engaged down there by renovating and fixing a lodge up. We all know that our lodges are in bad shape and stuff. And, we've got members who fix them up, and we love those guys. Yeah. Well, apparently, Grand Lodge of Tennessee did not necessarily. They saw a picture of this gentleman and his partner or his husband on social media, and they issued an edict. And you can read their edict on HODAP's blog page, Freemasonry for Dummies. And in my article, which is on WCYpodcast.com, it's the article that's up right now called Forcing Accountability again. And there's links to all of the different areas and the rulings and the edicts that have come out. But essentially, they expelled this guy and his partner, and they were both Masons, as I understand it. Expelled them and basically issued a gag order. I have a real problem with that in itself because I don't believe anything supersedes the United States First Amendment. You have the right to free speech, and I don't think, as long as you're not giving away, passwords, secrets, and do-guard signs and points of entrance, I don't think there's anything wrong. If something happened, it happened, and I don't think you should be able to tell a brother that you can't say anything about it. And these brothers did. They said a little something about it, and it kind of lit a fire on the web. And I was pretty livid about it. I grew up, and I've had friends that are straight, gay, lesbian, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. It doesn't really matter. We're these ideas of separating, of all these different ideas, it just drives me up a wall. And I think it drives a lot of people up the wall. And so this, of course, went all over the internet, and the policy, everybody who kind of broke their silence on this, when it was gone after, Grand Lodge went after them too. And I thought, the original article I wrote was very, very in your face, very angry. Thankfully, I love my editor like nobody's business, because he toned it down like a lot.
Oh.
And so I owe a lot to my editor. But essentially, you've got this issue where we are a progressive moral science. And progressive meaning that we need to be consistently moving forward and letting go of old, antiquated ideas and letting go of, dogma and whatever. And to me, the piece that I wrote was essentially attacking two aspects. The first, and it was the backdrop, was the issue of how dare somebody bring their religious eyes into something and cast a judgment on who is eligible to receive degrees and be a member of the fraternity. And those, when I say religious eyes, I mean, it's no secret that there are several religious groups all over the world who view homosexuality as a sin, and they view it as immoral. But that is a religious view and has no point and no place in the lodge, in my view. We don't do politics or religion, even though earlier we said we talked about Freemasonry as a religion. But it's a universal thing. It's supposed to be all-encompassing, and it's supposed to be welcoming. And the real reason for the article, again, the secondary part of the article was addressing these policies of social media guidelines and saying what we can and can't say. I mean, the bell was rung. The National Public Radio reported on this. And yet, here I was posting links to these decisions and things on my Grand Lodge Facebook page. And I know the administrator, and I know, there's a clear-cut line when it comes to being unbrotherly. And when I called the Grand Master of Tennessee not grand, that was probably unbrotherly and disrespectful. And I fully endorsed when they pulled my post down. To the secondary, or to the next area was I posted links to these articles in which the Grand Lodge of California now I can't say a Grand Lodge condemned another Grand Lodge, but they said that's not the way we see this fraternity. We see it as universal. We would not judge eligibility based on race, creed, sexual orientation, or anything of the sort. And before that happened, the Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C. issued a statement. Very similar. And recently, the Grand Lodge of Utah released a statement very similar. And I was posting these links to all these things. They were getting a lot of support, but there were, unfortunately, a few brothers who could not circumscribe their passions and keep them within due bounds. Much like me, I mean, you could say I was probably outside my due bounds, right, because I was posting this stuff and I was, maybe I was a little antagonistic. I didn't say anything. I just posted the article and said, hey, California weighed in. Hey, Utah weighed in. And really, the accountability is with, I think, every one of us to hold our fraternity to a higher standard, to make sure that they know where we stand as men and as Freemasons, and as in women at some places. I'm sure there are, ladies' lodges who feel the same way, that there's no reason to tell people they can't talk about these issues. And so my posts kept getting pulled down off the Facebook page because somebody would open their mouth and they would say something derogatory. One gentleman told me, I'm free to believe whatever you want, buddy, but, and that includes socialism and rainbows. And I was like, wow, I can't believe you said that to me, man. I mean, I've been nothing but cordial here. We had, of course, a good, go back and forth, of course, on Facebook. You get the notifications and you're already typing a response while the other guy's typing a response, and not arguing, but pointing out each other's, flaws in logic, and that's discussion. But unfortunately, he got a little bit